The Seattle skyline twinkled through the large windows as I, Owen Timmons, put the finishing touches on a document that sealed my latest success in the real estate world. This $50 million commercial project had been months of intense planning and hard work. But despite this achievement, my mind was preoccupied with the more important things: Emily and the twins we were about to welcome into the world. "Congratulations, Mr. Timmons," said Natalie Bell, my lead counsel, as she efficiently organized the papers on my desk. "This is going to revolutionize the downtown district." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. Claire, my personal assistant, stepped into the room, her expression tense. "Mr. Timmons, it's the hospital. Mrs. Timmons is in labor." The room fell silent as the shift in my role from businessman to expectant father was immediately clear. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat. My phone buzzed again, a text from my sister-in-law. "Samantha, Emily's asking for you. Something's wrong. Get here fast." "Claire, prepare the jet," I said, my mind racing as I planned the quickest route to Emily. "Natalie, finish up here and upload everything to my server. I'll handle the rest. And, ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to the room, "excuse me while I become a father." The 3-hour flight from Seattle to San Francisco felt endless, even with the luxury of my private jet. I tried to stay productive, reviewing hospital paperwork on my tablet. At 38, I had built my fortune by being meticulous about every detail, and today was no exception. A message popped up on my phone from James Walker, my attorney and close friend. "I've called ahead to the hospital. Everything is set up as per your instructions." I had made sure that Emily would have nothing but the best. The private suite in the maternity ward, partly funded by my charitable donations, was ready. The thought wasn't lost on me. My wealth had created the ideal backdrop for what should have been the happiest moment of my life. Inside the hospital, I walked briskly down the sterile hallways. The staff greeted me with respect, knowing the weight of the Timmons name in San Francisco. My donations had saved the pediatric unit just last year. Outside the maternity ward, I spotted Samantha pacing, her usually calm demeanor replaced with clear anxiety. Her designer blazer was wrinkled, and her hands were tightly clasped. There was something unsettling about the way she carried herself. "Thank God you're here," Samantha said, moving toward me. "Owen, wait. There's something you need to know before you go in." "Are they okay?" I asked, my concern sharper than I had intended. "Emily and the twins, are they healthy?" "They're fine, physically," she replied, her voice trembling. She gripped my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. "But you need to be prepared. I've waited 9 months for this moment," I interrupted, brushing her hand off with a firm but controlled movement. "Whatever it is, it can wait." "No, it can't," she whispered urgently, but I was already pushing open the door. As I entered the private suite, the air felt thick with tension, the weight of Samantha's unspoken words following me. Sunlight filtered through the luxury curtains I'd donated, casting a warm glow over the room. It should have been a beautiful scene, but it wasn't. The first thing I noticed was Leo Zhang, Emily's Japanese language teacher, standing far too close to her bedside. His hand was resting on the bed's railing in a way that made my stomach churn. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, his filled with guilt and defiance, before he quickly looked away. Emily lay on the bed, her usually polished appearance undone by the pain of labor. She held 2 small bundles wrapped in blankets, but instead of the joy I had imagined, her face was filled with something else, fear. And in that instant, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The room was heavy with tension, like the air right before a thunderstorm breaks. Emily's voice shook as she spoke, her words uncertain. "You made it." I wasn't sure you would." I took a step closer, feeling a strange pull in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. The feeling of betrayal hung thick in the air. Then my eyes moved to the babies, and a realization hit me so hard it knocked the wind out of me. The first baby had my complexion, a perfect blend of my Hispanic and Italian heritage. Dark eyes, like mine, looked up at me with innocent trust. But the second? My jaw clenched as I noticed the unmistakable Asian features. The baby's skin tone matched Leo's perfectly. It was like a cruel puzzle falling into place. Memories flooded back, each more damning than the last. The language lessons that always ran late. The cultural dinners where Emily and Leo sat too close, sharing laughs that felt too private. The art gallery events Emily insisted on hosting, with Leo always as the guest of honor. What I had dismissed as innocent now felt like a carefully calculated betrayal. "I can explain," Emily stammered, her face streaked with tears. "Please, just listen. You were always so busy, so focused on your work," she continued. Leo understood me. He shared my passion for art, for culture. "And you never meant to?" My voice was soft, but each word was like steel. "To lie? To betray me? To make a fool of me in my own home?" I pulled out my phone, my hand steady as I calculated the next steps. Crisis management was second nature to me. I had built my empire by staying calm and always thinking ahead. Leo stepped forward, his arrogance clear even now. "These situations, they're complicated. Emotions don't follow rules or business plans. What you and Emily have is about to cost you everything," I cut him off, my voice ice cold. "Your position at the cultural center, your reputation in the community, your marriage to Carmen, your children's respect. All of it, gone. Was it worth it? That's not fair." Emily protested weakly. "We fell in love. You can't just punish everyone because you couldn't keep your legs closed." A sharp, biting voice interrupted from the doorway. I turned to see Carmen Zhang, Leo's wife, standing there. Her elegance was shattered by the fury twisting her face. "Because you both decided your so-called love mattered more than your marriages, your families, your responsibilities," Carmen spat, her words cutting through the room like a whip. Leo's confidence faltered, and he paled. "Carmen, I can explain." "Save it," she hissed. "The kids and I are already gone. They saw the texts on your phone last week. 16 years of marriage, and you couldn't even bother to hide your affair properly." "The texts?" Emily's face drained of color. "You said you were being careful?" Carmen let out a bitter laugh, almost feral. "Oh, this is rich. Now you're worried about leaving evidence? Too late. Those language practice messages on your secret app? My son's pretty handy with tech. He recovered everything. Later, I sat in the hospital lobby, sinking into one of the premium leather chairs I'd donated, my phone pressed tightly to my ear. The situation felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. James Walker, my attorney and friend, answered immediately, his voice calm and professional despite the late hour. "Everything's in motion," James said, his tone steady. "Judge Caroline signed the emergency orders. Nothing leaves that hospital room without our approval. I've got teams securing all documents and devices at both houses." "Good," I replied, my voice even but filled with resolve. "What about the financial side?" "Already on it," James assured me. "The gallery accounts are frozen. That special savings account they opened? Documented. And the cultural center grant money? It's under audit now. They thought they were smart, but the trail they left is a mess of breadcrumbs." After hanging up, I leaned back, trying to process everything. Samantha found me a few moments later, sitting in a chair across from mine. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by guilt and exhaustion. "I should have told you sooner," she admitted, her voice trembling. "There have been signs, subtle ones, if I'm being honest. The way Emily and Leo exchanged glances at family dinners. The way she always seemed to need extra lessons before big gallery events. Last month, I even spotted them together at CEO's, a cozy little cafe, when Emily had said she was at a dealer's meeting. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked calmly, genuinely curious. "Would you have believed me?" She sighed, the weariness clear in her voice. Emily fooled everyone. The perfect gallery owner, the devoted wife broadening her horizons. Even Mom and Dad thought she was perfect. Samantha raked a hand through her messy hair, frustration and regret etched across her face. I needed proof, something undeniable. So, I started following her last week, taking pictures. But, well, the twins provided all the proof anyone could need. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back to reality. It was another message from Carmen. Her legal team wanted to coordinate strategies. Smart woman. Just as I finished reading, James entered the lobby, looking as polished as ever despite the late hour. "The press will catch wind of this soon," he said, his voice low but firm. "A prominent businessman, a cultural ambassador, a respected gallery owner? This story's too juicy for them to pass up." "Let them come," I replied, straightening my tie. "I have nothing to hide. Every hour I've spent building my business is accounted for. Every dinner I arranged, every gallery event I attended, every dollar I donated to support her so-called dreams, it's all documented. While they were plotting behind my back, I was creating a record of my devotion they'll never be able to tear down." Samantha frowned. "They'll try to spin this, you know. Make you out to be the distant husband, the workaholic who pushed her into someone else's arms. They can try, I said, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. But I have security footage of their late-night private viewings at the gallery. I've got bank records of their hotel stays. And let's not forget that cute little language app of theirs, logging every secret meeting. They thought I was too busy to notice, but I see everything. That's how I built this empire. James's phone chimed, pulling his attention. The judge wants to meet first thing tomorrow. Are you ready for this to get ugly? It's already ugly, I replied, glancing toward the elevator that led back to room 242, where my son, my only son, waited. But they're about to learn the difference between ugly and ruthless. The first light of dawn streamed through the lobby windows as we moved toward the elevator, our shadows stretching long across the polished floors. Above us, in the maternity ward, Emily and Leo might still have been clinging to the hope that they could salvage something from the wreckage they'd caused. They were deluding themselves. You know, Samantha said quietly as we waited for the elevator, Mom and Dad are going to be devastated. They treated Emily like a daughter. They'll survive, I replied, my tone softening just a touch. We all will. I glanced at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and regret despite everything. Thanks for trying to protect me, even if you weren't sure how. Samantha gave me a faint smile. What are you going to name him, your son? Lucas, I said without hesitation, thinking of my father. It's a strong name. A strong name for a strong legacy. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped inside. Now, I said, turning to Samantha, let's show them what happens when they mistake patience for weakness. As the elevator ascended, the rising sun cast a golden glow over the city below. It marked not just the start of a new day, but the unraveling of a marriage built on lies. Emily and Leo's carefully constructed world of deception was about to crumble. But I wasn't afraid. I had built an empire by turning every challenge into an opportunity. This betrayal would be no different. Somewhere above us, in room 242, two newborns slept peacefully, unaware of the storm their arrival had triggered. But this wasn't an ordinary battle. Unlike the ones I'd fought in boardrooms and real estate negotiations, this war would be fought with the harshest weapon of all, truth. 2 weeks later, James Walker's prestigious office overlooked the shimmering San Francisco Bay. But today, the view was ignored as he focused on the file before him. Daniel Mitchell, one of California's most meticulous private investigators, had compiled a damning report. His reputation for thoroughness had earned him respect and enemies in equal measure. Start from the beginning, I instructed, leaning back in my chair. My posture was relaxed, but my eyes were sharp, taking in every detail. 2 weeks had passed since the revelations in the hospital. Since then, I had done what I always did, secured my position and prepared for battle. At home, Lucas was safe under the care of a nurse I personally vetted, and my business empire was flourishing under my steady leadership. Now wasn't the time to crumble. It was time to strategize. Daniel opened his laptop, the screen lighting up with damning evidence. They thought they were smart, he began, pulling up a series of screenshots. They used a language learning app called Lingomate. On the surface, it's just a regular app for students. But they repurposed it to exchange coded messages, disguised as practice conversations. He highlighted several examples. Sensei, how do I say meet me at our special place in Japanese? The tea ceremony requires patience and discretion. Traditional meetings happen at sunset, when the cherry blossoms fall. Each of these practice conversations aligned perfectly with hotel bookings under Leo's name. Daniel moved on to show credit card statements. The Fairmorn, the Four Seasons, luxury hotels, all paid for with funds from the Cultural Center's educational outreach budget, Daniel continued. That's misappropriation of nonprofit funds, James remarked, raising an eyebrow. The IRS will want a closer look at that. It gets better, Daniel said, a smirk tugging at his lips. He brought up another set of bank records. Mrs. Timmons opened a separate savings account 6 months ago. She's been siphoning money from the gallery's operational budget, the budget you funded for expansion. Nearly $300,000 has been transferred so far. I didn't let my expression show my anger, but I couldn't stop my fingers from tapping rhythmically against the armrest, a subtle giveaway of my frustration. They were planning to leave, Daniel continued, his voice grim. Based on their messages, they had an entire escape plan. After the twins were born, they were going to wait for you to get tied up in a major deal, then disappear. The money, the documents we recovered from their secret email accounts, they all point to Kyoto. Leo has family there, and Japan has limited extradition laws. Show me everything, I said, my voice low and controlled. Every message, every transaction, every lie. For the next hour, Daniel laid out the full scope of their betrayal, methodically piecing it together. Hotel receipts matched Emily's late-night gallery events. Restaurant bills lined up with what were supposed to be language lessons. Every move they made, every secret they kept, was documented, archived, and cross-referenced. There's more, Daniel added at last. Leo's been embezzling from the cultural center for years. Small amounts, spread out over time, but it adds up. He used that money to buy art for Emily's gallery, art with inflated prices. He skimmed the difference. James quickly jotted notes. That gives us leverage with the cultural center board. They won't want this going public. What about his wife? I asked, still staring at the damning evidence on the screen. Carmen's been cooperating, Daniel confirmed. She's been incredible, honestly. Their kids found text messages last week, but Carmen had been suspicious for months. She's handed over years' worth of financial records, personal calendars, and deleted messages her son managed to recover. That kid's a tech prodigy. I rose and walked to the window, looking out at the bay. The view hadn't changed, even though everything else had. They thought I was too consumed with deals and developments to notice, I said quietly. Too focused on building my empire to see what was happening under my own roof. That perception works in our favor, James pointed out. Every hour you spent building your business is documented. Every dinner you arranged, every gallery event you attended, it's all proof of your dedication. Meanwhile, they were busy plotting behind your back. I turned back to them, my resolve hardening. Schedule the confrontation, I said, my voice firm. Here, in this office. I want them to see exactly what they've lost. The hospital's conference room felt like a powder keg, ready to explode as everyone took their seats. I sat beside James, my posture relaxed but exuding the kind of authority that only comes from knowing you hold all the cards. This wasn't just a reckoning, it was the beginning of their downfall. Across the table, Emily sat stiffly, her nerves barely hidden behind a mask of forced composure. Beside her, Ava Parker, a high-powered divorce attorney known for representing wealthy wives, cut an imposing figure in her sharp designer suit. Leo appeared via video call, his usual cocky demeanor noticeably diminished by the gravity of the situation. With his divorce from Carmen already underway and the cultural center board placing him on administrative leave, the once confident man was a shadow of his former self. Before we begin, Ava started, her voice dripping with calculated sweetness. My client wants to express her sincerity. Save it, James interrupted sharply, his tone cutting through the room. We're not here for apologies. We're here to discuss consequences. That's unnecessarily hostile, Ava snapped, her polished exterior cracking just slightly. My client understands the situation is complicated. Reasonable? James let out a frosty laugh. Let's talk about reasonable, Ms. Berger. Your client committed paternity fraud, misappropriated marital funds, and conspired to flee the country using embezzled money. Mr. Zhang, he continued, addressing Leo on the screen, I assume you're prepared for the civil suits my client will be filing, not to mention the criminal charges the cultural center is already considering. Leo visibly paled, his attorney, seated in the background of the video call, frantically scribbling notes. Those are baseless accusations, Ava interjected, though her client's ashen face told another story. Are they? I finally spoke, my voice calm yet cutting. I nodded to James, who began distributing thick folders to everyone in the room. Inside, you'll find every message you exchanged, every hotel booking, and every dollar you misappropriated. Did you really think I wouldn't uncover it all? We never meant to hurt anyone, Emily murmured, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. We fell in love. You can't punish us for that, Emily said, her voice trembling with desperation. I laughed, a cold, sharp sound. Was it love when you stole from the gallery I bought for you? When you planned to take my son away from me? When you mocked every sacrifice I made to keep our marriage alive? You were never there. Emily's frustration broke through, and she burst out, her voice raw. Always working, always chasing the next deal. Leo understood me, he understood my passion for art, for culture. Leo understood how to manipulate you while stealing my money. I said, my voice quiet but firm. Tell me, was that passion of his what inspired him to misuse the cultural center grant I arranged? The one you used to fund your little hotel rendezvous. Leo, emboldened for a moment, spoke up, his voice weak and tinny through the video feed. You can't prove any of this. The messages were private. James interjected smoothly, not missing a beat. The accounts were accessed by your son, a rather talented young man, it seems. He recovered everything you thought was deleted. Would you like to see? With a deliberate motion, James slid another folder across the table. Inside were screenshots of explicit messages, bank transfers, and hotel receipts. Emily's face drained of color as she flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. Now, James continued, his voice calm but unrelenting, here's how this ends. Mr. Timmins receives full custody of his son. The gallery, purchased with marital funds, reverts to him. Mrs. Timmins will sign a non-disclosure agreement and walk away with a settlement generous enough to keep her comfortable, provided she relocates outside California. That's preposterous. Ava exploded, her professionalism slipping. My client has rights. The gallery is her life's work, her passion. Her passion, James said dryly, appears to be fraud. Shall I share the evidence of art price inflation and the misappropriated cultural center funds with the FBI's white-collar crime division? I'm sure they'll find the bookkeeping quite creative. The scandal spread through San Francisco's elite circles like wildfire. It had all the elements of a sensational drama: wealth, betrayal, cultural prestige, and the poetic downfall of once revered figures. Emily and Leo, who had once been seen as pillars of the community, were now the subjects of whispers at charity galas and board meetings. Their names became synonymous with disgrace, serving as cautionary tales for those who dared to mix lies with ambition. The mighty had fallen, and for many, the spectacle was simply too delicious to ignore. The Cultural Center's emergency board meeting dragged on for 6 grueling hours. By the time it adjourned, Leo's resignation had been officially accepted. His accolades and achievements were scrubbed from their website, leaving no trace of the career he'd built. A full audit of the center's finances was already underway, ensuring that every misstep he'd made would be exposed. Leo's aspirations of being a cultural ambassador were now in tatters. His reputation was obliterated, not just by the affair, but by the financial misconduct that had fueled it. Emily's social downfall was equally swift and unforgiving. Gallery owners who had once clamored for her attention now redirected her calls to voicemail, or simply didn't answer at all. Charity boards discreetly removed her name from committees, and her connections in the art world vanished as word of her fraudulent pricing scheme spread. She went from being a rising star to a cautionary tale almost overnight. On a rainy afternoon, I met Carmen for coffee at a quiet cafe in Pacific Heights. She looked as poised as ever, but the fatigue around her eyes betrayed the strain she was under. The kids are struggling, she admitted, absent-mindedly stirring a latte she had no intention of drinking. Ethan's furious. He's the one who found the messages. And Nicole, she won't even answer her father's calls. They feel like their entire childhood was a lie. They're strong, I replied. Just like their mother. Carmen let out a bitter laugh. They made us look like fools. While we were building our families, they were tearing them apart. And the worst part? They're not even truly sorry. They're just sorry they got caught. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. How are you holding up? Better than I thought I would, she said, a faint flicker of determination crossing her face. The Cultural Center board offered me Leo's old position. Apparently, my art history degree and connections make me the perfect candidate to restore their reputation. I raised an eyebrow. Did you take it? I did, she said, meeting my gaze. It feels right somehow, taking back what he tried to ruin. For the next few hours, we exchanged information, each strengthening our respective legal cases. Carmen told me her children had agreed to testify about their father's character, shedding light on years of broken promises and missed moments that now took on a far more damning context in light of his betrayal. You know what's ironic? Carmen mused as the rain pattered against the window. They thought they were living some grand love story, but they couldn't even betray us properly. Every meeting, every stolen moment, they left evidence everywhere. Hotel receipts, bank transfers, text messages. It's like they wanted to be caught. They got careless, I agreed. They thought their so-called love would shield them from the consequences. Love? Carmen scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. Is that what we're calling selfishness these days? As we stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening as though the city had been washed clean. Carmen paused before getting into her car and turned to look at me with a quiet intensity. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but firm. Thank you for not letting them twist this into some tragic love story. They don't deserve that kind of dignity. I nodded, fully understanding her sentiment. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about truth, cold, hard, and undeniable. The truth of their betrayal, their theft, and their plans to abandon us. The truth that would follow them like a shadow, a constant reminder of the lives they tried to destroy. As I drove home, the clouds began to break, sunlight streaming through and illuminating the path ahead. Lucas was waiting for me there, too young to comprehend the storm that had surrounded his birth. But one day, I would tell him everything, not as a story of tragic love or justifiable betrayal, but as a lesson in consequences. Swift, merciless, and absolute. It was the only legacy Emily and Leo deserved. 3 months had passed since the confrontation at the hospital. The morning sun poured into James Walker's office as he methodically laid out the legal strategy that would dismantle every remaining piece of Emily and Leo's lives. Each day had brought new evidence, adding weight to the inevitable reckoning they could no longer avoid. The paternity test results are in, James said, sliding a document across the polished surface of his mahogany desk. Though, honestly, we didn't need them. The visual evidence was damning enough. I picked up the paper, scanning it quickly, though my face remained unreadable. The results only confirmed what I had known since that gut-wrenching moment in the hospital. I was the father of one child, Lucas. My son carried my blood, my legacy. The other twin, a girl Emily had named Lucy, was undeniably Leo's. This strengthens our position significantly, James continued. By refusing to sign the birth certificates that day, you shielded yourself from any future claims regarding Lucy. Emily can't pursue you for child support. And the gallery? I asked, my tone cold and calculating. The businessman in me fully engaged. That's where it gets interesting, James said, flipping open a thick file. We've traced every dollar, James continued, his tone cold and methodical. The initial purchase, the renovations, the inventory, all of it came from marital funds. More specifically, from your income. Emily's contribution was limited to her so-called expertise in art selection, he added, which, as we now know, involved inflated prices and kickbacks from shady dealers. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted him. Daniel, the private investigator, entered with his usual efficiency. He placed a laptop on the desk. You're going to want to see this, Daniel said, opening it. The financial audit of the Cultural Center just came back, and the numbers tell a damning story. He walked us through the findings, detailing how Leo had been systematically embezzling funds for years, disguising his personal expenses as cultural outreach programs. Hotel stays with Emily were listed as seminars, while extravagant dinners were filed under community engagement events. The board's livid, Daniel added. They're not just firing him, they're pressing criminal charges. The DA's office is already involved. James smiled, a predatory grin that suggested he had just been handed an unexpected opportunity. Perfect timing. Carmen's divorce proceedings are set for next week. This will obliterate any chance of Leo claiming alimony or significant assets. What about his visa? I asked, turning to face James. His work sponsorship is tied to the Cultural Center, James replied, his voice deliberate. Once they officially terminate him. He let the implication hang in the air. The door opened again, and Natalie Bell, my corporate counsel, stepped inside with a stack of documents. The gallery's financial audit is complete, she announced briskly. We found everything: secret accounts, fraudulent art deals, even evidence of tax evasion. Emily skimmed money from nearly every transaction to build her escape fund. I stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. San Francisco continued in its usual rhythm, unaware of the meticulous justice being orchestrated in this office. Send everything to the IRS, I said firmly. Let's make this official. There's more, Natalie added, her tone barely containing her satisfaction. Remember those Japanese investors Emily brought in last year? The ones who paid exorbitant prices for specific pieces? We traced the funds. It all leads back to Leo's family accounts in Kyoto. They were laundering the Cultural Center's embezzled money. James let out a low whistle. International financial fraud. That adds a whole new dimension to the charges. And custody? I asked, turning back to face them. Lucas is my priority. That's already in motion, James assured me. Given the evidence of their planned escape to Japan, no judge will risk them fleeing with either child. We're pushing for you to get full custody of Lucas. Emily will likely be granted supervised visitation at most. As for Lucy, James continued, she'll probably stay with Emily, but we're advocating for a complete separation of the twins, given the toxic circumstances. A soft chime from my phone drew my attention. It was a message from Carmen. Her divorce proceedings had begun, and her children's testimony about their father's character had been devastating. Years of missed birthdays, broken promises, and lies now painted an even darker picture of Leo's betrayal. How are they handling it? I murmured, more to myself than anyone in the room. Emily and Leo are falling apart, Daniel said before James could speak, satisfaction clear in his voice. Her attorney tried to spin you as a cold, workaholic husband, but we dismantled that quickly. Every dinner you hosted, every gallery event, every donation, it's all thoroughly documented. Meanwhile, Natalie added, we've proven she was sneaking off with Leo during events you sponsored. She's getting desperate. Tried to claim partial ownership of your real estate by saying she supported your career. The judge threw it out almost immediately, James remarked, leaning back and neatly stacking the documents. They wanted a fairy tale ending, he said dryly, but they're walking away with a cautionary tale. The gallery, her social reputation, his career, everything was unraveling. The divorces were finalized swiftly and brutally. In court, Judge Voice rang with authority as she delivered the ruling. In the case of Timmons versus Costello, this court finds clear evidence of financial fraud, marital misconduct, and attempted parental kidnapping. The gallery, purchased with marital funds, is awarded entirely to Mr. Timmons. Miss Costello's claims to any part of his business holdings are denied. Emily sat beside her lawyer, her once impeccable style reduced to a failed facade. The carefully curated image of the elegant wife crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. Regarding custody, Judge continued, this court awards Lucas Timmons's custody fully to his father. Supervised visitation for Ms. Costello will be contingent on psychiatric evaluation and parenting classes. Leo's life was unraveling just as rapidly. Fired by the cultural center, under criminal investigation for years of embezzlement, and losing his visa, he had 30 days to leave the country. In the matter of Lucy Zhang, the judge addressed Emily, primary custody is granted to the mother. However, given the circumstances, the twins are to remain separated to prevent further harm. Any violation of this order will result in custody loss. Ownership of the gallery was transferred instantly. While Emily sat in court, security changed the locks and boxed her belongings. Her already fragile reputation dissolved entirely as evidence of her fraudulent dealings became public knowledge. Carmen's divorce ended just as decisively. Leo lost his family, his position, and his children's respect. Their testimony destroyed his chance at any custody rights. Justice finds its way, sometimes unexpectedly, Carmen remarked to me as we watched our former spouses leave the courthouse separately, weighed down by the consequences of their own choices. A year later, I stood in my home office, the sun setting over San Francisco. Lucas, now a thriving toddler, slept soundly in the next room. What could have destroyed me instead stripped away illusions, leaving something unbreakable in its place. The gallery flourished under my management and Carmen's partnership, her art world connections revitalizing it. Together, we built something genuine. Updates on Emily were rare. She was a part-time art teacher, her reputation in ruins. She had become little more than a fading ghost of her former self, a stark reminder of the cost of deceit. I turned from the window, peace settling over me. My focus was on Lucas and the legacy of truth I was building for him. Emily and Leo's lies brought them justice, swift and final. Her court-mandated visits with Lucas had become stiff and mechanical, closely monitored by court-appointed observers. Each session was carefully documented, noting Emily's growing bitterness as she struggled to connect with her son. Leo's fall had been even steeper. Back in Japan, he scraped by teaching English in a small, unremarkable town, his lofty ambitions of cultural ambassadorship reduced to ashes. His teenage children refused all contact, their silence a stark rejection of the man who had shattered their family. They had even chosen to change their surname, severing ties with the father who had brought so much shame. The last letter I received from Emily sat unopened in my desk drawer, a relic of her futile attempts at reconciliation. I didn't need to read it to know it was filled with justifications and hollow apologies. I had no interest in either. That chapter of my life was closed. That evening, I walked through the gallery, taking in a new installation. It featured a series of photographs that told stories of transformation and renewal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ready for dinner? Carmen's voice broke my thoughts. She approached with her children, who had grown close to both Lucas and me over the past year. Their bond had deepened into something genuine, something far more valuable than I ever could have imagined. The kids want to show you their art projects, she added with a smile. I returned the smile, realizing that life's cruelest moments often open the door to unexpected blessings. My son, Carmen's children, and the honest relationship we were building together were more precious than any illusion I had lost. Yes, I said, taking her hand. Let's go home. We walked out of the gallery together, leaving behind the ghosts of betrayal. My triumph wasn't in the destruction of Emily and Leo. They had orchestrated their own downfall. My victory was in rising above the pain they caused to build something authentic, something lasting. As the gallery lights dimmed automatically, their soft glow illuminated a quiet truth. True love speaks the language of honesty, and real family is built on trust, not lies. That lesson, born from the wreckage of my first marriage, was the foundation upon which I was creating a future worth cherishing. 12 years later, a crisp San Francisco evening painted the city skyline in shades of gold and crimson. I stood atop my latest achievement, a sleek, 50-story tower that dominated the financial district. The building was more than a testament to my business acumen. It was a symbol of resilience, proof that I had turned betrayal into strength and loss into opportunity. My real estate empire had more than tripled in the decades since that fateful day in the hospital, but my proudest achievements had nothing to do with business. Lucas, now 12, embodied the intelligence and integrity that had carried me through my darkest times. The boy's olive complexion and dark eyes reflected my heritage, but his passion for art came from Carmen's patient guidance. Over the years, we had forged a family built on trust, not illusions. Together, we transformed the Timmins Contemporary Arts Gallery into an international powerhouse. Carmen's artistic vision, paired with my sharp business acumen, turned what was once a symbol of betrayal into a beacon of innovation. Our marriage, celebrated 5 years after our respective divorces, stood as living proof that love could rise from the ashes of deception. Ethan and Nicole, now 27 and 25, had flourished in the 12 years following their father's betrayal. Ethan's early tech savvy led him to Silicon Valley, where he developed cutting-edge security software inspired by the techniques he'd used to uncover Leo's affair. Nicole, taking after her mother, entered the art world. Through merit, not nepotism, she earned a curator's position at Timmins Contemporary, where her work added fresh vitality to our gallery. For those who chose betrayal over loyalty, however, the years had been merciless. Emily Costello's life continued its downward spiral. Despite numerous attempts, her efforts to rebuild a career in the art world were met with consistent rejection. Though the fraud charges were settled through plea agreements, her reputation never recovered. Art schools turned her away, galleries refused her expertise, and even community centers kept her at arm's length. Recent reports placed her in Portland, teaching basic art classes at a senior center, a far cry from the world she once dominated. Her visits with Lucas had grown strained over the years. By the time he turned 10, Lucas exercised his legal right to refuse contact altogether. Her final attempt to reach him came in the form of a tear-stained letter on his 12th birthday, which, like all her previous letters, was returned unopened. She tried reaching out through Instagram last month, Lucas said one evening during our weekly father-son dinner. She wanted to explain her side of the story, as if there's any way to justify what she did. I studied my son's expression, seeing the same quiet strength that had carried me through my own trials. "And what did you say?" "Nothing," Lucas replied, his voice steady. "She made her choice 12 years ago. She chose him over her family, over me. Actions have consequences, right? Isn't that what you always say?" I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "It is. And you're living proof of that lesson," Nicole said with a scoff, her voice tinged with both disbelief and a hint of amusement. Leo's downfall had been even more spectacular. After his deportation to Japan, he tried to use family connections to resurrect his career. But the news of his crimes had traveled ahead of him. In a culture that valued honor and propriety, there was no place for a man who had betrayed his family and professional trust. His attempt to open an English-language school in Kyoto failed when parents discovered his past. He eventually settled in a small rural town, scraping by with barely enough students to sustain his meager existence. His children's rejection of him became official when they formally changed their surname, severing the final tie to their disgraced father. The low name now survived only on his passport and teaching credentials. He tried to contact me through LinkedIn, Ethan shared during a recent family dinner. Wanted to rebuild our relationship. Said he'd grown from his mistakes. Grown? Nicole scoffed. What growth? He's still the same man who destroyed our family. Owen watched as his family, Lucas, Carmen, Ethan, and Nicole, chose integrity, strength, and love over bitterness. The betrayals of the past had left scars, but they had also paved the way for a future built on trust and resilience. It was the kind of legacy he had fought to protect, and ultimately, the only one that mattered. Last I heard, Nicole added with a scoff, he's still blaming everyone else for his mess. Mom didn't understand him. Dad was too focused on work. And us? Apparently, we betrayed him by telling the truth. The mention of Lucy, Leo, and Emily's daughter cast a shadow over the room. Everyone's expressions turned complicated. The court-ordered separation of the twins had remained firmly in place over the years. Reports through legal channels revealed that Lucy still lived with Emily, her existence a lingering reminder of the choices that had shattered so many lives. She looks like him, Lucas once remarked after spotting a social media photo. But that's where it ends. We're not really siblings. We're just two kids who happened to be born on the same day to people who chose lies over love. Samantha, who had been the first to suspect Emily and Leo's betrayal, had risen to become one of San Francisco's most respected banking executives. Her painful vindication transformed her into an unflinching protector of her Timmons' new family. Over time, her relationship with Carmen grew into a true friendship, forged by a shared understanding of what betrayal costs and how trust can heal. Under Carmen's leadership, the cultural center had not only recovered, but flourished. Her focus on authentic cultural exchange and transparent operations restored its reputation, making it a cornerstone of the community once again. The scandal that had almost destroyed the center became a famous case study on institutional recovery, now taught in nonprofit management courses nationwide. James Walker's meticulous handling of the legal fallout brought him even greater acclaim. His dismantling of Emily and Leo's schemes had become required reading in law schools, a shining example of strategic litigation. Despite his growing prominence, James remained a trusted advisor to the Timmons family, his efficiency in safeguarding their interests unwavering. Daniel private investigation firm grew into one of the most sought-after security consultancies in the city. The techniques he developed to trace the financial trails of the affair became innovative fraud detection tools, leading to new advancements in the field. His son, now interning with Ethan's software company, was working on the next generation of security protocols, a collaboration that underscored the interconnected strength of their extended family. On this evening, the Timmons residence was alive with celebration, the dining room filled with the sound of laughter and conversation. They had gathered to honor Lucas's academic achievements, a moment of pride and joy for the family that had risen above so much. As Owen stood beside Carmen, watching their blended family enjoy the evening, she leaned toward him and spoke softly. "You know what I've realized?" "What's that?" he asked, his eyes still on the people who meant the most to him. "Everything they tried to steal, love, happiness, success, we built naturally. While they're still haunted by their choices, we're here celebrating our blessings." Owen squeezed her hand, his wedding band catching the soft glow of the chandelier. "You're right," he said, a quiet smile on his face. "They chose lies. We chose love. And that's why we won." The betrayal that should have destroyed him instead became the cornerstone of a new life, one defined by resilience and a deeper understanding of family. Lucas laughed with his step-siblings, sharing the progress on his latest art project, while Ethan animatedly discussed the expansion of his tech company with James. Nearby, Nicole and Samantha were engrossed in a spirited debate about gallery acquisitions. This vibrant, interconnected group wasn't just a family by chance. They were bound by choice, loyalty, and the shared values of truth and integrity. It wasn't the downfall of Emily and Leo that defined Owen's victory, it was what he had built from the ashes of their betrayal. His son would grow up immersed in examples of character, surrounded by people who lived with purpose and honesty. That was Owen's legacy, not revenge, but restoration. Later, as the lights of San Francisco sparkled like scattered diamonds below their hillside home, Owen stood on the balcony. The city buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the stillness of his thoughts. The pain of his past was long gone, replaced with a quiet gratitude for the blessings it had brought. Emily and Leo had lost everything to their deceit, careers, reputations, and relationships left in tatters. But Owen had found a love built on trust, a family forged through shared values, and a future brighter than he'd ever imagined. In the garden below, Lucas's voice rang out, full of youthful enthusiasm as he showed Ethan his latest photography project. The boy's artistic talent had been nurtured by Carmen's patient guidance, blossoming into a passion driven by truth and creativity. It was proof that art could be an expression of authenticity, not a tool of deception. Ready for bed? Carmen's voice broke his reverie. She wrapped her arms around his waist, grounding him in the warmth of the present. Just thinking, Owen said with a soft smile, about how sometimes life's hardest trials lead us to its greatest gifts. Carmen leaned into him, understanding without the need for words. They had both endured betrayal, but what they had found in its aftermath was far more valuable, a love grounded in sincerity and a family built on trust. While Emily and Leo's lies had earned them nothing but regret, Owen and Carmen's steadfast commitment to truth had created something enduring, something worth celebrating. In his office sat an unopened letter from Emily, the latest in a string of futile attempts to reconnect. It was a relic of a past that no longer mattered, a reminder that some bridges are better left burned. Owen knew the future belonged to those who embraced truth, who faced adversity with grace and determination rather than deception. As he held Carmen close, the sounds of laughter and conversation from inside their home reminded him of the life they had built together. It was a life shaped not by vengeance, but by resilience. Sometimes, the worst moments in life cleared the way for the best ones. Sometimes, the deepest wounds created space for the most profound growth. This wasn't a story of destruction. It was a story of rebuilding, of finding love and purpose amidst the ruins. Owen's journey had led him here, to a life built on authenticity, a family forged in truth, and a future full of promise. And that, he realized, was the ultimate triumph.